Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production, whatever comes up in the questions. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on, given that this is we talk about media and this is the last day of the year. We're going to talk about what next year looks like for media and what we think is going to happen. And so if you have questions or comments about that, go ahead and throw them into Mukana. Tomorrow, of course, we'll still have education, even though it's the first. We are hardened, so that doesn't happen on YouTube. So you have to be on Zoom to partake. So anyway, hopefully we'll see you there. And let's go ahead and jump into the questions, Bill.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Our first one comes from Nick Batt in the UK, and he says, Office Hours uses -24. YouTube suggests -14 decibels, podcast -16. Should you remaster a live stream video podcast for each platform in terms of audio and video, or is there a general level to aim for?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
And broadcasters want -22, so there's probably as many different settings as there are companies that provide services. It's kind of hard mentally to get into it because in the analog days, it was always a matter of getting it as loud as it could go without distorting or clipping. But with digital, you have to be very careful that the peaks don't reach zero, because if they do, they're not there. There's nothing there. So I think Alex has some thoughts on where we're going to go from here.
Yeah, our peaks have more to do with the limitations that we had in the past with some folks with their mic setups and everything else. And so it had less to do with where it was aiming and more what could we make sure that we just wanted to be consistent. Now that we have generally more professional pipelines, what we're going to do is probably move it up. And so just a little bit, because it's a little low in its raw feed. It won't really matter as much with Office Hours 2.0 because we'll have more control over the output, because the raw feed from Zoom isn't going anywhere. So I think that we'll experiment with it a lot more at that point where we can add it. In fact, even if you look at the 2.0 test stream, you'll notice it's 10 dBs louder than the regular stream, because I'm just experimenting with what that sounds like. In general, when I do podcasts, I actually get it right up to zero, or -1, like the peaks, not luffs, but the peaks are right up at -1, because people can always turn it down, but sometimes they can't turn it up. You'll find that is the case with things like Apple trailers and other things like that. Now, I don't do that with live events because you just don't know what you're going to get. You can put limiters in and compressors, but you don't want to press up against them if you don't have to. So we tend to have a little bit more headroom for that, but we still push it. I think most of our live streams, when we're doing them, are -6 or -3 peaks. So we pay a lot more attention to peaks because that's when they distort. Go ahead, Jeff.
So I'm playing catch up a little bit, so I apologize if I ask questions that have already been asked. Are you putting a actual console or software solution in line in the new 2.0 workflow as far as like real audio processing, not just whether it be a software based like Harrison or something like a QL1? What do you have in mind?
Yeah, so right now, the show is going through an FS-HDR because it's converting it to HDR on the way out. So we're running a 709 show, and then it goes into the FS-HDR and is processed up to HDR. And so because of that, I have control over both sync and for the overall show. Now, what we're going to be doing relatively soon is going towards ISO audio for everyone in Zoom. And so inside of that, we will run it through most likely an X32, and then we'll use the universe interface that we have that's talking to Isadora to use OSC to talk to the X32. So that will allow us to automate to some degree, automate both the leveling, but also things like sync and everything else. So we're working on a tool that will let all of the panelists here, for instance, put up a mobile device, and it will sync everybody in about 30 seconds. So that'll, and what it's doing is it's measuring tones and color, and it'll send that back to Isadora. Isadora will measure it and then use that measurement to send an OSC command to the X32 to change it. Now we can also use REST commands. We have Andy Carluccio built a OSC to REST handler, so we're able to, if we wanted to send it to the FS-HDRs, we could as well. So that's what we're working on right now. So the couple different options. We're still all year we'll play with it. So 2.0 will be an exploration of how hard and how far we can push the production. Go ahead, Bill.
I always remember that old thing, and I have no idea who said it first, but the great thing about standards is that there are so many of them, and this is something that I deal with a lot because I still deliver into the broadcast chain, and even broadcast stations are still fluffing around a lot about what is our target level. So I am hearing also that -22 is becoming more and more popular out there. More of my stations are requesting that, where some of them were at 24 and some of it were, well, and then outside broadcast, everybody was all over the place. So hopefully this will settle down even more in the future.
It probably won't. Next question.
Moving on to the next question. The next question comes to us from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he said, how do you use false color on scopes?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, typically you're using them while you're shooting to see if somebody's overexposed. So for me, for example, for like my flesh tones, you'll see this is no omniscope. If you have a chart, you can see you want to keep those flesh tones where between those two grays, where it looks more like a flesh tone. And then you can also tell if you're overexposed very quickly because it'll turn red. So a lot of people use these with like a Ninja or some kind of external monitor. And I think Dave is going to start bringing in some no omniscope so we can see in our situation here what when somebody's overexposed or what part might be too dark or too bright.
Good, Sky.
I follow a gentleman named Shane Hurlbut. He is a director of photography out of Los Angeles, has done many things that you'd recognize, and he teaches an entire course on this concept, and there's a link on YouTube where he talks about it, and it was during COVID, so you'll get to see his family and his house as well, because he's talking about it from his home.
Go ahead, David.
I'll happily work with anybody to dial those scopes in because I know nothing about them, but I have them available. So
I've reached out to Omniscope to Nobe to come on, and I think we'll have them on sometime in the next month or two. So we'll be able to dig into it deeply. The first step is to understand what they all do. And by the way, the folks that make Nobe Omniscope, if you go to their YouTube channel, incredible videos of understanding how scopes work. Because what they didn't do is make videos about how their product works. They just use their products to talk about how scopes work. So, which is exactly the right way to build content. So I would highly recommend checking those out as well. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Joshua Feingold in New York. And Joshua says, HDMI 2.1a was pre-announced with full unveiling to come at CES. Is this something office hours participants should care about?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Probably not. 2.0 gives you 4K HDR, and it should be enough bandwidth. The new specification, you can see it here, is I think it goes up to 64 kilobits, or is it 84?
Gigabits, right.
Gigabits, yeah, 48 gigabits, sorry, dyslexic. 48 gigabits and dynamic HDR, and that's what the packaging is going to look like. It'll be labeled ultra ultra high speed. Ultra high speed, and it'll be marked on the cable, and have holographic labels to prevent counterfeiting for all those Japanese cable and Chinese cable manufacturers that are going to be cranking out the ones that are labeled 2.1A that aren't really 2.1A.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So it does improve on the spec. I have a Roku that goes into my 70-inch TV, and whenever I watch something in HDR10, it's kind of a back and forth. Every now and then it'll do this green screen type thing, and then I have to back out and come back in 2 or 3 times before the HDR10 kicks in. I'm hoping a cable like this is going to give them the enough the freeway to work with and make that not happen. So that's what I'm guessing. But I will be at CES, and I will be stopping by the booth. If anybody wants me to ask questions about it, please let me know.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the 2.x, a lot of it has to do with the handshaking for copyright protection, which shouldn't be in our territory. We shouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, the big advantage for us is that it is it opens up the options for the over the set, so the OTT to take over. So that's the big thing, is that it can tone map, it send a tone map signal to SDR. So for people like me, this is a big deal. because I have to right now send a HDR ladder as well as an SDR ladder out. If this, 3 years from now, when this is normal and everything's supporting it, I'll be able to send an HDR feed out and potentially some instruction sets to just allow for the OTT box to basically send the tone mapped version or the tone mapped information to the TV. That can allow us to avoid having the TV do anything. The best thing for us as producers is for TVs to do less and less and their OTT boxes to do more and more, because the TV circuitry is cheap and poorly made and doesn't work very well. Not that I'm bitter. All right, next question.
Next one comes from Tim Holman San Lorenzo, who's here in the panel. Says, it's been stated not to use plastic wire ties to manage Ethernet cables. Does the same apply to HDMI cables? And what about Velcro? Does that interfere in any way?
Go ahead, Jeff.
As a system integrator for 35 plus years, I do subscribe to, if you don't know what you're doing, then don't use tie wraps or the plastic wire ties. They can be used in the right position in the right place, but you don't want to crank them down and make them tight as much. People that don't necessarily understand, that's what they do, and it ends up breaking inside or creates a kink somewhere. The second side of that too is they're less likely to allow you to run another cable when a cable goes bad or a connector goes bad, or invariably you just have to add another cable. So that's where the Velcro straps come in to really, really popular way of doing it. As far as HDMI, we use a mix of both, but same thing applies on the HDMI cables with plastic ties. You crank down on it, you crimp it, it's a little bitty wire inside there. Eventually it's going to break. So Velcro is probably the most common way to do it, but it's also a little bit more expensive in the long run.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I'm big on the red whips. They're kind of like these little elastic jobs with a cam to kind of create a loop for temporary things, and then for permanent installs, the Tech Flex wire loom stuff is always good stuff.
Noah?
Yeah, obviously with Ethernet, you could terminate at the distance that you need to try to minimize the number of ties you have. I'm a huge fan of the Velcro ties. And my kind of trick is to basically cut it short so that you don't have 6 wraps around the thing. You have the exact length that you need. That way it's easy on and off.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Old school way is to take shoelaces or string and do it that way. You could pull it and make it, but it's tougher to do. The other thing that I suggest is if you've got an old Ethernet cable, open it up and then grab there's like 8 wires, and you can make super long things, which just like with the sock that David showed, you can wrap it around cables so it's kind of following along as well. And you can, whatever size you have is what you can use.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Even if you know what you're doing with the plastic tie wraps, which I thought I did, the other part where the gotcha is when you have to add another wire and you use your wire snippers to get the tie wrap cut, and oops, there goes one of your Ethernet cables. So stay away from them.
Next question.
Serge Blondin is up next in Montreal, Canada. He says, I notice Alex is not using the Heil mic anymore. Is this a new recommendation?
I'm just experimenting to see what I think that this one sounds a little bit more natural than the Heil did. And of course, as I got closer to it, the Heil obviously had proximity. So I'm playing around with this. This is my voiceover mic. This is a TLM 102. So when I do voiceovers, this is what I use. The problem really is that, and I've had it for years, it's not new. The problem with it is that it picks up absolutely everything in the room. So it's not something that I necessarily recommend. I had to kind of reorganize things in my office just to use the mic. So I think that it is, but it's a good mic, and I think I'm going to use it for a month and just see what I think of it and compare and how it works. And I'm playing around with placement. Like for instance, I think that it sounds better actually a little further away. So I'm kind of playing with that right now. So just decided I haven't used this mic, and it's an expensive mic sitting in a box. And I had not used it at all because it was really picking up so much that I couldn't use it. And I realized I had stopped using it before I started using the noise assist. And so now that I have the noise assist, it really cuts down on a lot of the ancillary stuff. And then I just have to be more careful with what I do when my mic's open. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, and he says, today is the end of the year for 2021. What are your office hours highlights from the past year?
Go ahead, John.
Tons of highlights. I believe wasn't Belfast and all of our episodic things born this year as well. August was our 500th episode in 2022. We will surpass Twit and MacBreak Weekly in total episodes.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So yeah, many different features. The big thing was being able to switch a show, because I've never really done that in that capacity before. So that was a lot of fun. I've learned a few tricks to improve my own shows. And then, of course, towards the end of the year, I had the Mac M1 brought in. And if you've been watching After Hours, you've been seeing me put together a brand new show for 2022.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm a little bit of an outlier, and I wasn't aware what Office Hours was about until the summer passed. For me, I guess just knowing what it was and how to get in there, and then the whole megillah of things that you guys are doing or we're doing is a wonderful thing. So that was my biggest highlight.
Go ahead, Bill.
I don't know why it stands out for me. When Andy Carluccio showed up the first time or the second time, there was a circumstance where we had a ton of questions piled up for him. And I can't remember if it was actually on the show or in After Hours, but he went through one of the most impressive demonstrations of knowledge that I had ever seen. I was reading the questions for him, and I was reading them as fast as I could, and he was answering them with an incredible velocity, and his depth and breadth of knowledge and ability to send that out to people in an understandable way was just stunning. I remember that we finished that up and Alex closed the show, and I just kind of sat back and went, my God, that was amazing.
Go ahead, Sky.
I remember the day, the minute, the hour that Alex Lindsay called and said, "Hey, want to be a guinea pig?" And it was it was an amazing opportunity of watching a community come together and do things that had not been done. And now Jef Keefley, of course, has been doing the on-air online for many years in different ways. But to see a community from around the world come together was just phenomenal. But of course, having coffee with Alex Lindsay, that's a moment in my life, and I have that in person, and that was a unique thing that not everybody may have the opportunity. So I value that highly, but also to meet Noah Sargent and how sharp and exciting the future looks. So I'm thinking 22 is going to be amazing.
It's hard to believe that all those processes, that all the remote stuff that we've been doing and all the different ways we're doing.
Thank you, Victor.
All started
and Andy
with Victor and Andy. In this year, like it's a crazy thing that because now there's so many things, so many different permutations that are kind of growing up inside of it. Go ahead, Noah.
Thank you, Sky. That's very flattering. But the thing that stuck out to me is the cadence of people outside, like in the industry that I've ran into and talked to and worked with over the past year that know Office Hours. So I felt like in the beginning, or really obviously 2020, when working from home, there's less people who knew about this community. And I feel like there's more and more people that I've connected with and talked to, obviously from this group outward, but also from the outside world in, if that makes sense. And just more and more people are talking about it. And you know who you are that need to be on the show that aren't on the show yet. You should come. You should be here.
Go ahead, Ken.
There's been so many highlights. The one that still resonates with me, still sticks in my mind, was the Raspberry Pi build with no Pi left behind, and seeing that community, or the community we have here, work together with everyone is still brings a tear to my eye when Tony got this finished right at the end. It was brilliant.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd have to say being on the set of Mad in the Kitchen and seeing the behind the scenes of how many people showed up to actually watch and see what was going on, it hit me that there's more people watching the behind the scenes than watching the show. And I was like, wow, more people want to learn about how to do this than the show right now. So it was really like a goosebumps moment.
Yeah. TJ?
I just want to highlight Victor Cahiao's work that he did early this year with getting himself going with QLab and with Zoom OSC and all these technologies that Andy Carluccio helped with. He really was a pioneer, and I don't think he gets enough credit.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully he'll come back, and when he's finished with his travels, and we'll show him what we took with his great ideas and what he started, and we've grown it into a whole bunch of things. So hopefully he can come back and Victor can benefit from all of that. Go ahead, Sky.
Okay, I need to lift up JJ. He is a hero and a half and a half, and whatever exponential thing that I'm going to cry now, because that human has not just learned how to make cables. He's figured out where they, and he what he brings to this community is behind the scenes is just amazing, and his heart is just as big as he is. So
Great.
he's amazing.
And John?
Victor and I had lunch on Monday, and Victor and I are going to produce a sax jam here at my house soon.
Nice. That's great. And I think that one of the big highlights also is after hours. I think that we launched it, and I think that it's at this point just an amazing part of the community. You can't imagine not having it at this point. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Tim Cooper in York, South Carolina. And Tim says, rendering in Davinci Resolve for YouTube and Facebook, do you use the default render settings or use some tweaks? I usually shoot in 4K, he notes, but render to HD.
Good, Sky.
As a post-production facility, we used originally Blackmagic Resolve as the utility knife that could do all of those different things. And yes, we used their initial settings because somebody had done the science and the testing at that moment, but always it's like flavor to taste because each product is a different compression issue, different length. And so can you always tweak things? Sure. But let's start somewhere.
Go ahead, Noah.
So my understanding, especially with YouTube, is you have that leveling, right? So 360, 480, on and on. So the higher you allow or upload, right, the more range you have. And even for an HD video, which I do a lot of my stuff on, and if you upload in 4K, you allow that extra bandwidth for that higher quality. So that's one thing to note. Obviously, like Sky just said, with the compression, right, depending on what it sends out, you'll have different compression rates. So I would look at your internet. If you have high-speed internet and you have the time to spend a little bit longer to upload, you might as well upload at a higher quality.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're producing a 4K, you might as well put it out at 4K. The one thing I will recommend is not using the H.264 compression inside of Resolve. That is a preview version and not a delivery H.264 process. It is horrible. Like, it is not like, I love Blackmagic, as you know, and I use Resolve, but I never export with H.264 out of Resolve because the damage it does to primary colors and other kinds of detail is pretty bad. And so you're much better off rendering out an Apple ProRes out of there and then taking it through your compressor of choice. Mine is compressor, but you can take it to whatever you'd like, but don't use the H.264 outside of, going out of Resolve. Next question.
Michael Weber in Foxborough, Massachusetts comes up next, and he says, what's your preferred brand and model of TV flat panel display for switcher multi-view displays, looking in the 70-inch range?
Go ahead, Jef.
My first question would be, how far away is that screen? Because 70 inches is huge. For most people to be able to see that, it's going to need to be in a normal operations. This is something we ran into. We've built several master control rooms and a lot of actually OB trucks and such too. Is like the larger the display, especially if something that's HD resolution, that's not 4K resolution, which finding multi-viewers to do 4K is challenging. And so at HD resolution, what you end up doing is moving your head side to side to see what is up, or up and down, depending on how big the display is. So I found that size for us in our trucks and such, we are about, say, 36 inches away, 36 to 40 inches away. I want something that I can see everything just by moving my eyes. Otherwise, at first you're like, oh, this is a great big screen, but after shooting on it and switching with it, it's not good to be that large. So you want to really evaluate. Now, if you're 8 feet away or you're looking across a room, then maybe a 65 or 70 inch would work at that point. My personal favorite that I've found are LGs. In answer to your question of brand, LG's it's a 43 inch, and I've got a slew of them now. A 43 inch, it's a 43 UN700, and it has it's just a phenomenal display because it has 4 HDMI inputs that allow you to do a quad split within the panel. So you could have 4 computers within the panel, it's equivalent to, say, 21 and 22 inch diagonal monitors at that point when you're at say a 30-inch view, and the view is great. It's got a great color, it's got a great sharpness to it. So that's my go-to for most of our OB trucks now and our OB builds. If you're going in a larger space, again, you need to evaluate how much content you're putting on it, because bigger doesn't necessarily mean better. And yes, I'm from Texas, and I actually said that.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, my partner in the business, who happens to be my wife, and Jef can attest that I might have a screen problem. I have a lot of screens, and Jef built our truck, for those who don't know. But my favorite is the Samsung. I have those all over the place. They make it, Samsung and LG, to me, you can't tell a difference in quality wise. But yeah, I do have a lot of screens. I have 4 50 inches here, and then 3 27 inches on my desk. And you can't have enough screens. I'm just wanting to tell you that you can't have enough. So
I go with Courtney.
One of Jef said covered most of the salient points. Yeah, I wouldn't go for a 70, especially for multiview. The scalers in multiview are not that good, so you're not going to need, super HDR or a lot of those features. If you can get a 4K, if you can find a scaler that does 4K, yeah, maybe. But remember, your visual acuity is only about 20% of your field of vision, so you're not going to be able to, see that much. You'll see stuff in the peripheral, but you won't be able to judge it very well, and especially at 70, if you're close to it, closer than about 20 feet, it'll be just too big for you to see. I like 55s, and I use a lot of TCLs, which are cheap for multi-views, because they do the job, and they have the resolution, and the panels are actually quite good, and they're like the second or the third largest seller of panels in the world. So use them or Samsungs.
Yeah, go ahead,
and a 55.
Yep, Mitchell?
I'm a fan of Sony. It's no secret. I have a 90J. I also have the OLED version of that. And none of them are over 65 inches because I'm almost 10 feet away. And if you're viewing for pleasure or for professional reasons, once you get that far away, you can't see the pixel pitch that much. It's it's kind of a diminishing returns type thing. So a 70 is too much, an 85 is ridiculous. If I were to pick a close second to Sony, I would say the LGs.
David?
I'm going to plus one on the 43 UN700 LG. I use one in lieu of a smart TV, and 3 of those 4 inputs, I have an NVIDIA Shield, a Roku, and an Apple TV, and I'll quad split it and watch stuff in the living room.
That's great. Go ahead, Noah.
So I kind of actually disagree. The 70-inch obviously is all about the distance, right? And so if it fits your room and what you need, then you'll go with that. Obviously, the Constellation and the higher end switchers allow for a full 4K multi-view, which is great. I personally use a 55-inch on the top of my cart, and that's at about 40 inches away from the screen. So that fits the distance, and I think that works well.
Yeah, almost all of our stuff is 55 inches, and we use the Samsung, I think like the 7000 series or something like that. It's like $400. They're relatively disposable. We use 4K splitters, for them. So the 4 MV from Blackmagic, and then we put the multi-views into that. And the reason we do that is so that we can now really play with it. And if we're doing a 1080p show, we've got 1080p in every quadrant. And we've used, I don't know, I probably bought 50 of those in the last 5 years. So when we build control rooms, we oftentimes use those across the system as well. Next question.
Jonas Dotel has a question for Jef Keithley, actually. Jonas says, anything new or exciting that you've been working on or using lately?
Go ahead, Jef.
We've worked on a few things kind of fun lately. Matter of fact, it was because of office hours, I was able to bring in a few friends here. I had Brian Maddox come in and do some audio for me. This is a little event in Vegas. And it was, and Doug came in and ran camera and a little bit of switching involved. It was an new esports company called Gala Games, and they are one of the very first that are doing this new play to earn. So they call it PTE. So it's involved in crypto and esports, and it was something else. 35 years plus being in business, I've seen a lot of big shows. This show was beyond. And the numbers I was hearing, they literally said, yes, this is probably one of the most expensive produced shows in Vegas in decades, not years, decades. And that's saying something. For the amount of money they spent was just unbelievable. It was a great thing to be part of it. And if you want to search it on YouTube, you can see some of the videos that were shot and stuff. We had robotics. I had actually a bolt, one of the Mark Roberts bolts along the stage,
Nice.
which was, it was insane for
How
live
is it-
video.
How is it for what's the noise envelope for that? Does it make much noise when it's moving around?
Maroon 5 didn't need to seem to notice, and Kings of Leon didn't really gripe
I guess
about it
once
either.
you're in a full concert view, you probably don't hear it.
And honestly, even in a speaking environment, it didn't really matter either.
Okay.
So we had this is the set actually that Doug just put up. This is the set. It was this massive
the rotating chicken. The rotating chicken.
Yeah, it was just.
Of course it was.
It looked like a TV set, except a lot of these places were. You'd go into most events, most events that we were part of, like the set design and everything is all about one theme. This ballroom had 6 of them, and it was to the level of a TV studio in every single area. I mean, it was like Disney. It was like walking into Disney, and just the attention to detail. There's over 350 hang points. If for those of you that are geek out on hang points, you can see in the truss and area, and just the lighting over. It was like 1,500 or 1,600 lights, moving lights. I mean, just an unbelievable amount of gear. To the point that they had to cut gear because they were running up against the ceiling limits of how much it could hold. That's that when you run into that, when you run out of
trussing
and stuff to be able to support more weight because they were at the level.
When you run out of weight instead of money, it's a thing.
Yeah,
That's
there were
great.
boxes and boxes of lights that weren't used. Yeah, stacks. It was unbelievable,
That's
but it
great.
was a lot of fun, and there's apparently more coming. So.
That's awesome.
It's fun. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Nice to be away from something that's not, just flat screens in front of us all the time.
Yeah.
So,
It was an insane show, insane. I got lost. Seriously, I got lost going back to craft services because they turned this ballroom into this 5 rooms that were designed in the game. Like there was a Dungeons and Dragons one and the chicken one, and I seriously got lost in the maze a couple times.
That's awesome. That's great.
it was fun.
Thanks, guys. The next question.
Next question comes to us from Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California. He says, how do you manage your downtime? I sometimes get anxiety, not feeling like I'm not getting much done, though, while other times I know I need to rest between projects.
Go ahead, Tim.
I think it's a challenge for all of us because we love our trade so much that we can end up spending so many hours on it that we look back and we go, where was my time in all that? I do amateur photography where I can just walk away from everything, and I do kind of landscape stuff and street photography, so I can just get away for a few hours here and there. And really, it's technical, but yet it's still very relaxing for me. So that's what I do.
Go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, similar to Tim, I find it important to have something that is exercises my mind, but in a different way than, so if for me, if I'm working with computers and stuff all day, doing woodworking or something like that, where I still have some problems to solve, but they're different problems. So I'm still exercising my mind, but it's a little bit different. And that helps sort of restore the creative juices when I got to go back to the normal thing.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
A lot of times I get put on automatic. I work like crazy on a particular project and time flies. I mean, I go in to start an edit first thing in the morning, and next thing I know, it's dark outside and the dog is saying, hey. But the downtime, it seems to take care of itself. At least for me, I just zone out and say, wow, I was working like a crazy man. So I don't really have to work at it because I've been doing it a long time, but the body knows. If you listen to it, it'll tell you.
Go, Jeffrey.
As we talked about a couple weeks ago, I don't have rules. I have guidelines. And a simple guideline, for example, is I never eat in the studio. I always go to an area to eat, and that makes me realize, hey, it's time to take a break and go from there. Plus, I have a wife that understands some needs and everything like that. She'll come in and say, hey, do you think it's time to take a break? And then if I'm sitting looking very antsy and watching a movie or something like that, she turns to me and goes, you probably want to go back over to the studio and get some work done. I go, yeah, I do. So plus, I do have a little bit of a scheduled time, workout in the morning. Got to get on the drum set every day so I can get some practice in, and things like that. So putting a little bit of structure into it is a good thing.
Sky.
I'm not as disciplined as Guy Cochran. I know his exercise regime is very rigid, and he benefits from that. So the word value, and what do I value? And I value being able to see the view out of the back of my where I live onto a beautiful scenery. And so I've tried to learn how to prune the trees that have been getting in the way. And that's a time for me to start seeing the value of, not just getting a better view, but also being in nature, touching the thing. I'm not as good as TJ with his garden and his boxes that eventually I'm going to learn more about gardening. But, and I know Alex is going to learn to garden better too. So I'm intentional about what I value. I'm not very good at a lot of things, but I'm trying.
I definitely cook, and I am starting to grow things. I'm trying to get to a single ingredient across everything by the end of this year. So I've got about 80% of it done. I've been slow. A lot of it's more enrolling the rest of the family in it, but so basically everything just starts as raw ingredients, and so that's kind of my little obsession to kind of go through there. And then I do a lot of things that are nothingness, about 2 or 3 times a day, about 15 minutes, and that might be a nap, that might be just staring out at something. But I've learned that breaks aren't doing something. Breaks are breaks. And so I sometimes I just need to literally allow my brain to just stop and just wander around for a little while, and then come back to what I'm working on. And I think that for a while I made the mistake of thinking playing a game or doing something else that required effort was the same as taking a break. And I learned very quickly that it was not, and that I'm far more creative if I stop for 15 minutes or so, 3 or 4 times a day. That is just a complete stop, and not doing anything else. And I find that hard because my brain can find things to do. I decided I wanted to listen to Appalachian Spring, with headphones on and laying down. I figured that'd be a good break. And then I just thought of a whole movie for it. So I spent the whole time thinking that by the time I got finished, I got this whole movie, and it was all this stuff. And anyway, so it doesn't help. Anyway, next question.
Next one comes to us from Sky Gleason here in the panel from Seattle. Can Jeff Keithley show a small light he uses when his video conference mic is open?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, yeah. Embrava, I believe is what it is. Currently, right now, it is red. It's hard to see in the color with the screen. It's USB directly into the computer, and it ties into Zoom, Teams, Google Meets, 4 or 5 others, just kind of whatever video conferencing you're using. And it's green if you're offline. If you're not, as soon as I turn on Zoom, it goes red. So I have it off to the side of my desk over here, and anybody that comes walking up to me, even if I'm sometimes just watching or listening, if it's on, they understand not to just barge in. So it's worked out really well.
That's great. Next question.
Next one comes to us from TJ Asher, and TJ in Minneapolis says, for those that are old enough to remember them, what was the first CD compact disc that you owned?
TJ?
I got this one. It's Asia by Asia, purchased in 1984. I actually bought it about a week before I got my first CD player.
I had that album. I had the album. Yeah. So anyway, go ahead, Ken.
Mine was Billy Joel, 52nd Street, summer of 1983. So I got you beat, TJ.
Nice.
As soon as Sony came out in the United States, I bought that thing.
Nigel?
Yeah, that would be, for me, Brothers in Arms, the first $1 million selling CD in the UK.
Oh, that's great. John?
I don't remember my first CD, but I was at CES when they unveiled the CD player. And it was amazing because they pushed play and you didn't hear any noise, and then the music started. I thought that was the weirdest thing ever.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I think Tim took mine.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think mine was Windows 3.1. So that came in a box of CDs.
There you go. Go ahead, Tim. Yes, no?
I already answered, I think.
Oh, I don't know why I didn't. Okay, sorry. There's some order issues on our back end.
Yeah,
Go
no
ahead,
problem.
Courtney.
Mine was also the Dire Straits Brothers in Arms. Although I did have a Commando Cody and his Lost Planet Airmen, which was one of the first digital recordings I had.
Go ahead, David.
I think it was 1985's, what was it? Larry Fast Synergy Computer Experiments Volume 1, played on a Sony D50 portable CD player.
Did I miss anyone? We had an issue in the back end. So we're trying to do something different. Anyway, yeah, for mine, it was Depeche Mode, Some Great Reward. Next question.
Moving on, Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California is up next. And he says, for end address microphones, what really works best? Talking directly in, speaking past, how does the differing positions affect the end result?
Go ahead, Noah.
Your position matters greatly, and it does affect everything. So Heil PR40 is an end address. So I'm speaking past the microphone based off of what I've seen on office hours, essentially. And it's all about trying to minimize the plosives, right? The P's and the S's. And so I also have a pop filter. It probably could use a little more space, really, if I get nitpicky. But yeah, I'm talking past the microphone. And then I also noticed that if I breathe, I can hear myself through my nose, but not necessarily through my mouth. So things to watch out for.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, having done voiceovers for years, and in the early days, you didn't have a home studio that you had to go into a station and they would hang a microphone in front of you. And you learn very quickly that every mic works a little different, and it works a little different with your voice. So I would always just literally, my first test read would be just listening in the headphones that they gave me and trying to figure out where I had the right balance of low end, crisp, those crisp sibilants and TH sounds that make speech that's recorded easy to understand. You just kind of move around and learn to work every mic. And that address, I've seen so many pop stars playing with microphones and using a side address mic and talking to the end of it, that you just really have to learn a little of this. And I think it's trial and error.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the most volume, the best signal to noise ratio would come from perpendicular directly to your mouth, but that's not necessarily the best place because you get a lot of plosives. So if you don't have pop filters, you want to move it down a few degrees to avoid the plosives and still have a decent pop filter in front of it. Otherwise, those puffs of air can bottom out the microphone, which will create problems.
Yeah, I have to admit, you'll notice if you look back when I was using the Heil or this, I personally will never put a mic straight in front of me because I'm always concerned about popping, and I'm always concerned as I talk into it. So it's always off to one side, and I've done that for 30 years. Like it's just always it's one side, and it comes in, and I cut across it. And if this is a different one, but I still have it to the side, and that from a video perspective, that also gets it a little out of the way of my face. And it also, but I also find that is the way to minimize any kind of popping. And I feel like I actually have the most control. So next question.
Noah Sargent's up next from Fullerton, California again, and he says, the X32 is a popular office hours audio mixer. My church is looking to upgrade, but needs 40 plus channels. Recommendations under 10 grand. The GLD 80 is currently the board, and faders are going out on it.
Go ahead, Jef.
I am fighting this a lot right now. A lot of our clients are looking for consoles. We're looking for consoles. Everybody's looking for consoles. Yamaha has basically said, don't order anything. We're not going to fulfill it all of 22. So like literally they're like taking orders for 22. It's going to be 23 before they start fulfilling new orders. There's nothing being available short of really high end like Digicos or Calrex or even the Lavos, if you can find one from Germany. Maybe Jonas can help. The biggest issue is all the lower end stuff. So under 10 grand, find something used. If you're in a situation where you have to you have to substitute something in right now, find something used. That's about the only real option. If you can find an X32 out there and you're familiar enough with it and you can work around its intricacies, which are definitely there. Coming from a GLD, they're there's definitely differences, routing differences and things like that. So you want to find somebody that you can trust as an integrator to help you build your workflows around what it can do. But even Dante boxes are going to be few and far between in the next 6 months to a year. They've also said that their chip production is way, way below what they expected, and demand is really high, but there's zero supply. So you're just going to have to, it's what you want and then what you can find. That's what we're at right now.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I've used Allen and Heath for years. Had iLive, and now we have SQ series. But if you want bigger, the DLive would accommodate a ton of channels for you. But again, you will have availability problems, because even getting little accessories for these, like breakout boxes or stage boxes, they're all back ordered.
Yeah, I think that for us, what we've generally done is I mean, the way we think about it is Behringer under $2,000. Once we go over $2,000, we go to Yamaha, or at least I go to Yamaha. I don't know but I go to Yamaha after $2,000, and then the next step up from Yamaha is usually a Calrec. So those are the three that I kind of have lived in for the last little bit of time. Next question.
Rupert McRae's up next from Dallas, and he says, are there any good New Year's events being live streamed?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, they're one of the best events, but it is private. But I might open it up to the office hours family, because it's my birthday on New Year's Day, and I normally stream that with my family.
Your birthday is on New Year's Day?
Happy birthday eve.
Amazing. You better be here tomorrow morning. That's all I'm saying is we've made a rule. We don't sing birthdays to the non-birthday days. You have to be here tomorrow morning. But we request that you are, so that we can sing you a horrible song.
But technically, by the end of this show, it will be tomorrow.
Oh, maybe for... No. He'll still be
somewhere in the world.
there.
It's his birthday right now.
Yeah, exactly. Jeffrey?
So technically this show is a New Year's thing, because right now, was it Hong Kong, Beijing, Singapore, they're all getting ready to celebrate for the New Year's, and of course Tokyo did it at the top of the hour. So happy New Year.
Aside from after hours going all night and day long, I like to watch the Dubai fireworks that stream every year. It's an amazing, amazing show.
I have to admit, I grew up loving fireworks, but I'm now watching all these drone light shows. That in China, they're doing a lot of the drone light shows where there's like 5,000 drones out there doing fireworks, but with drone lights. And the geek in me really gets into watching and just thinking about it breaks my head to think about how complicated that is. Next question.
Next one comes from Tim Cooper in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And Tim says, any suggestions on a sub $100 headphones, primarily for video editing, but also for video conferencing?
Go ahead, Jesse.
Coming in at $99, I like the Audio-Technica ATH M40Xs.
That's great. Mitchell?
The broadcast standard MDR 7506 Sonys, you see them everywhere, especially in broadcast. So I would go with those guys.
Good, Sky.
Yes, second Mitchell's comment, and these are actually, the foam will degrade, but you can buy the new foam covers for a fairly reasonable cost, and they're just bulletproof. I've had these in the field on many a shoot, and they've come back to me because they're turquoise. People hate that.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would say is that one of the two things that are competing with that are that I don't use over the ear for video conferencing. So as soon as I go to video conferencing, when you say that, I'm immediately in ear. So for editing, I'm over ear. So, and I use a Audio-Technica, but it's a little more than $100. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say the 7506s are ubiquitous, partially because they're not great music headphones, but they have a little presence peak right around human speech, which makes them incredibly good if you're trying to monitor whether you have problems in recording somebody. And I think that's one of the reasons that they're really ubiquitous across the industry, is they have that little bit of that's not sharpness, it's just a little bit of presence that really helps you pick speech out of a muddy world.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I have I'm going to pile on, Alex. These are the 7506 Sonys, and I've got them plugged into the Movo, which is a great headphone adapter. That's all it's good for.
Yeah, exactly. It has a webcam and it has a mic, and the only thing that's good for is the headphones. We tested it yesterday in after hours. All right, next question.
Next question comes to us from Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina. He says, Bumblebee Sidekicks. Do people prefer one ear or two, straight or curly cord?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so I use the single one. I actually use the N-ear version. I don't know if it's the same driver or a cheaper driver, but it's definitely a cheaper solution. I find all day on Teams or on Zoom, I like one ear hearing what's going on around me as well as one ear feeds. However, if I actually really need to listen, they're not good enough for doing anything like editing. So I'll go back to headphones or these Lindsay ones if I actually need to hear what detail. But I can have these other ones in my ear really all day and I don't notice it.
Go ahead, TJ.
Unlike Nigel, I like both ears. These are not so sound blocking that you can still hear the environment around you. And I just like having the sound balanced in both ears. And I prefer the straight cord.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I use the one ear straight cord, but I wish I got the curly cord because I have to stick the, even though I've got the clip, the back of it, because it comes with a clip, I still find I have to stick the wire to the back of my neck so it doesn't show. So I think the curly cord might have been better, but that's what I use.
Yeah, I have a strong preference for two ears. I admit that because I have a lot of things that I try to put into it, and so I like to be able to put things stereo and move things around if I want to. So I have side tone or program or both and all those things. And so I prefer stereo. I'm using the Linsoles as well for the show. But when I do broadcast or Mac Break or whatever, I use these, and I use two ears, and I use the straight not because I've done it with the Sidekicks, but in other ones, the curly cord just becomes something that catches things and gets into things and kinks up, and it's not been something that I found to be as manageable. It's also harder to roll and put into a case. So these are the things that I worry about, especially if you're using other IFBs that come with long coily ones. It just is a nightmare. Next question.
The N-ears are on sale until midnight tonight on their website. Just wanted to note. Rupert Cray, Dallas, Texas, says this week's Office Hours episode covering the Zoom-Liminal transaction has been one of the most popular Office Hours videos on YouTube. Does this point to the significance of the acquisition and the interest in the future?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know for me, watching it was because it was part of the family. Moving on, having a really great. So I don't know whether it was because of that, that it was really almost everyone who's part of Office Hours would have wanted to watch that episode rather than just the larger community outside.
Jeffrey?
I think this was the first time that we've had the outside influence, well, besides the NPR thing, the outside influence really bring in a little bit of the audience and looking at some of the analytics, and I'm not going to go too deep into that, but I know that the OSC, the first time that Andy came on to talk about Zoom OSC, is actually better numbers than the trends of the acquisition. So, but there are some really good episodes if you look at the past episodes, and some that have done really, really well.
Yeah, I think also it was on Zoom's blog with a direct link to our show. So I think that probably impacted the number of people that showed up. So I expect it to probably eclipse everything else that we've done, except for possibly the WWDC coverage. So that's my guess, based on probably some more PR that goes out next week. Next question.
Tim Holm in San Lorenzo is right back. He says, this time, what would the audio chain be for a Zoom call being brought into a hybrid event? Mix minus into the Zoom audio input would be selected, but where does the output of Zoom to the person in the event go?
To the in-person event go.
In-person event.
Jeff?
Yeah, I probably need a little bit more clarification on that too. Are you talking about to the talent themselves that's on stage? Well, then that should be going to ears if possible, IFBs. But if it's not going to talent by that way, sometimes you can use small speakers or small monitors to do it. But you have to be very careful and make sure your mix minuses match up, of course. If you're going to the house audio, that's where the real challenges get in if you're having a two-way conversation with two different locations and also feeding the house audio so that everybody there can hear intelligibly.
Yeah, We use Dugan auto mixing for that to push the mic and the speakers back and forth when we do it in room. So, and that's a pretty common thing for us to do. And so you basically have when someone's talking into the mics, it's going to push the speakers down. When the speakers come out, it's going to push the mic down. Careful tuning with that will actually allow you to do it. I don't think I would do an in room without a Dugan auto mix. Like I don't think that I would ever. I don't know if I would try it anymore. We've done, well over 100 of them that way, and it's worked perfectly with Brian Maddox tuning in, including we make sure that they have it on the other end, and then we have Brian log in and tweak it for the far end because it is, as Jef said, it's complicated, and you really want someone who knows what they're doing tuning that. So that's what I would look at. Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California. Up next, has anyone played with Snap Camera and any real use cases besides fun?
Go ahead, TJ.
I think play is the key word here. It's fun. It's something that's interesting to play with your friends or your family. Be careful if you let your children play with your computer and turn it on. You do not want to be the attorney who turns into a cat.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And of course, it will put the program into the system tray. I was having this problem and I couldn't figure out why. It was a Snap camera, and that was when we were leaving after hours, going into office hours. My camera wouldn't turn back on, and that was because the Snap camera was taking over all my cameras. So you just have to watch out for that because it can become a real problem.
Next question.
Jason Robert Shaw is up next from Sarasota, Florida. And Jason says, are you bored with Alexa? Bloomberg reports interest in Alexa has faded, and Amazon loses up to $5 per device. What's the future of voice-enabled devices? And will Apple make their Siri equivalent of an Echo Show this year?
Go ahead, TJ.
I'll speak to the Siri part of this. I use Siri all the time. I think it is woefully behind the other audio interfaces. I think that needs dramatic improvement.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I own all three: Google, the Echo, and the Siri. The Amazon one. The reason, Amazon make money from it, not just from they almost as a giveaway device. So it's understandable why their cost for it. They make the money back on the usage and the sell stuff from it.
That's the idea, anyway. I think that was the concept.
Yeah, that's what they're planning.
Yeah, Nigel.
Yeah, so I look at this through a home automation rather than a deliver music or make phone calls point of view. And we're seeing the emergence of actually in the home automation for bigger homes products like Josh AI provide a completely different home automation environment. We did a home recently with 168 shades. So, Alexa, open the shades is like, well, what room would you like? And so tools like Josh AI are starting to use AI to interpret when you say, turn on the lights in the dining room. Even if dining room isn't a word in your system, it will work out what you meant and solve that problem for you.
Courtney?
Yeah, I'm not bored with it. I have both the Google device and the Amazon device in every room, and I rely on it to turn on all the lights, or to you can program them to do routines so that, like you say, it's time for bed. It'll automatically turn out the lights downstairs, turn the lights upstairs, turn on the heater, turn off the TV, turn on. It'll do about 17 things with just one command. And when my connection to the internet goes out, I am really lost.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I'm maybe a bit of a cynic, but Amazon would give these away. They would embed them with anybody and everybody because it buys you into their system, which they get a piece of. Just like we as humans are Google's product because they scrape what our habits are, and then they sell that information. So in that sense, the device is kind of irrelevant and the cost is going to be minimal, but they need to give you the illusion that it has value for you, when the reality is it's all to get us to buy into their system to sell more stuff where they make their money.
Yeah, I own all of them. The only one that I'll leave on is the Apple, is Siri. so that's the only one that I'll actually leave on in my house, just because of that I know too much about the devices. And so no one should, in my opinion, you should be careful of the rest of them. Anyway, so that's the one that I leave on. I experiment with them. I will say that what I like about the Amazon device is that the skills you can build skills. Like I think that for my wife's birthday one time I created a skill that if you said who's the most beautiful woman in the world, it would Alexa would tell you her name. so those are the kind of fun things you can put into the back end. You can build skills for it to do its own things. You can do a little bit of that with shortcuts and so on and so forth on Apple, but it's that was kind of a fun. There are fun things that you can do, and you can build a lot of those decisions inside of it. So I think that that's a really cool thing that they've done better than everyone else. But I still don't leave it on. And we found that the Amazon device said "huh" a lot more than everybody else. It needs to say that because it needs to tell you that it's responding. It's very disconcerting when a device says "huh" a lot because you feel. I felt like I was being listened to you are being listened to all the time, but you're very conscious of it when it's constantly turning on when it shouldn't. And so it was the one that probably did that the most. And I think that that's probably why we turned it off first. Next question.
Could have something to do with your name though, Alex.
Yeah, probably could. Good point. So anyway, it happened a lot and it was a problem. All right. I don't know why I didn't think about that before. Anyway, next question.
David Paskin's up next from Miami, Florida, here on the panel. What would be the value of using Sonobus for comms as opposed to something else?
Go ahead, Jeff.
From someone that uses a lot of comms and a lot of different versions of it, Unity, VCOM, ClearComm, name them all, pretty much have my hands on it sooner or later every month. Sonobus is not a comm solution. It's an audio transport solution. It doesn't even have echo cancellation according to their website. So I'd be wary of it. A comm solution is going to need to have some type of either echo cancellation or a true mix minus type of bus. So if you just need a single party line, I mean, there's a lot of options out there. Sonobus would not be one I would suggest, but I would look, if you need comms are affordable. They're not free, but they are affordable. You just got to look at the right ones.
And as a note, as we start to kind of transition for the second hour, we got two more questions. If for some reason we sent your question back, just note that it's in your notes inside of Mukana. So if you check out notes in the Mukana section, you'll find that we're pushing some of the questions from the first hour out. You can, of course, bring them back tomorrow. Let's go to the next question.
Next question comes to us from James Hutchinson in Dublin, Ireland. He said, I just got a Shure MV7 and Flow 8 based on office hours recommendations. Can you recommend a good mic arm? Please balance cost against quality and function.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, the Wave from Elgato low profile arm is I've got one holding my mic up presently. This is another one that I've bought. So impressed with the quality of it. All metal. Can take the weight of my Heil mic with the cage and stuff around it, and it's fully, you can do loads of adjustment, 5 axis of adjustment on it as well. Low profile Wave. Can't recommend it more highly enough.
Go ahead, Jesse.
I use the Rode PSA-1, and I would be very careful about going cheap on the boom arm. It's one of those things that can drive anybody insane almost instantly if it's not working the way you want it to.
You go ahead, Mitchell.
Don't get any boom arm with external springs on it. They're noisy and they will annoy you. As an alternative, because all those suggestions are good, I picked up a blue arm, which is really inexpensive. It's only about $40-some, and it's hydraulically one of the best I've had in it. I've got a big old Neumann hanging on it right now, and it works great.
Go ahead, TJ.
And since the Elgato Wave has been mentioned already, I'll mention the OC White low-profile mic arm. Well built, incredibly well built.
When it comes to it's incredibly well built. That's what I use. I use an OC White Ultima 2, I think, and it's incredibly well built. It doesn't balance the price very well. It's probably the most expensive arm I've ever bought. But I spent $400 or $500 trying to find the right arm, and like buying cheap ones, going, I'm not going to spend $350 on a mic arm. And I just kept on saying, I'm not going to do that. And then finally, there was one day where I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And it's the best arm I've ever had. I will say that I think that if I did it again, I'd probably at least try the Elgato one before I did this one, because everyone's so happy with it. This has a height adjustment that I don't think is available in the Elgato, so that's the only thing. Ken will let me know if it does. Does it? Oh, then there you go. So it may be. I mean, it'd be interesting to see both of them in the same place at the same time to do that. So maybe we'll do that in the future. Next question.
James Hutchinson, Dublin, Ireland, up again. And he says, at Jeffrey Powers, did you 3D print those glasses and how long did they take?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So yeah, I printed, it's on Thingiverse. I'll put it into the, into Makana here. There's two different types of frames, and then the bows took 9 hours total, but you probably don't have that much time. So print one of the two glasses, you'll probably get it just in time. The other thing to think about is this takes a pin system. So what I did was I did ceiling hanging wire, and I kind of cut the right length and took a pair of needle nose pliers just to push it into the hole and work from there. So really good.
It's funny, I'm going to move 3D and other things into Wednesdays, and I can't decide whether 3D printing should be on Fridays or Wednesdays because it's 3D, but it's also very logistical and kind of, and so I do think that we're going to probably in 2022 cover 3D printing probably once a month. It's kind of like one of the things I've been thinking about is kind of user groups, a monthly user group of things, and putting them into different days. And so, but I think that there's so many of us that do 3D printing. I think we could at least do 1 second hour or a couple second hours, but I think we could probably have projects and so on and so forth just to really kind of dig into it, because it's, as someone who's had 3D printers or had other people do it, and then I finally got one and let it sit around for a while and then started printing. It's like this freeing, I need this thing to do the thing. And then you just sit down and model it. And so we're going to talk more about modeling and also more about printing in 2022. All right. Now we're going to change subjects just a little late. And we're going to talk about trends. So this is the last day, 2021. Some of you have already crested over that. But the last day for most of us for 2021. And we thought it would be a good day for us to think about what's going to happen next year, or what do we think is going to happen in our industries next year. And we can look further out if we want. But I think that'd be a good day to kind of think about that. So if you have for our panelists, go ahead and raise your hand in that first open discussion if you want to say something before we jump into the questions. All right, let's go, TJ.
I think the thing that I'm finding interesting lately is the trend toward very, very high quality long-term television shows as opposed to a movie. The production values that are getting pushed into television shows are at or even exceed those that are going into the major motion picture industry right now. And I find that the watching experience is actually better watching these long-term television shows, because you get more character development, you get just an overall better sense of the material as opposed to just cramming it into a 2-hour block. And I'm finding that the 2-hour block of the movie is becoming nothing but just special effects and whiz-bang things, and the story is getting lost in a lot of these movies lately.
Yeah, a lot of people that I'm talking to anyway, don't view theatrical release as a major part of their calculation. They're like, why would we develop IP and then have it only go 2.5 hours when we can have it go 8 hours and generate more? The ROI is much higher, especially if that's going to help hold people into a subscription service. The subscription service is way more stable from an income perspective than hoping that something has a good weekend, or hoping that it gets good reviews. And so, and the thresholds are so much different, where like Red Notice is a good example. The most viewed movie on Netflix ever, it would have bombed in the theaters because it's not very good. It's good enough. It's good enough for a Friday. Like, you turn it on and you're like, oh, that was good fun. You don't think I spent $100 taking my family and buying popcorn to go see this movie, because if I had come out of Red Notice after going to a theater, I'd be bitter. That was like a complete waste of time. I never want to see that again. As a Netflix video, I was like, oh, that was good. It's fun. I never need to see it again, but it was good. It's good, clean fun. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, on the trends in the media that I work in is websites. The growth of and the power of CSS, the styling part of web pages. That's really, I believe, is going to grow a lot bigger You'll see a lot more of that in 2022 of what that can do, replacing the need for JavaScript. And with the Microsoft finally ending support for IE within the corporate fields, that's going to even more you'll see the development and the growth of CSS and HTML.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
In an airplane flying to Burbank to do work in the industry of media production, I read an article from a studio head that said, I can always buy my audience. And I really pondered that. And then I realized how much marketing money is spent on like you say, on a movie that may not be worth going and spending $100 for just one family. But then I listened to a gentleman who, again, a thought leader in my world anyway, a gentleman named Seth Godin. And he talked about what is the problem that needs to be solved that only you can do. And they kind of flipped the script on that studio head saying, you have to go see this movie versus reflecting on, oh, why am I here on this planet? And what is it that I can do to help make a better world? And so that's where I'm looking at what trends are available to us now that we've been empowered over these last 2 years of not being so influenced to go do a thing because the studio head, made it big and loud. And again, to TJ's point, it's often just a lot of fireworks now. And the story that we are creating is kind of, we're being enabled and empowered to do that.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I guess 3 quick thoughts. I know there's an Olympics this year that often changes things, even though it's a Winter Olympics, and I wonder whether NBC is finding that a more and more expensive thing to have owned. The second thing is we have an election next year, and I think we'll see non-mainstream media sources continue to grow, internet-based things. And third, we're seeing a huge connection between gambling on sports and enjoying sports at home. And I think we're going to see increased integration of those things into the experience that people want, at least in their homes.
Courtney?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a large amount of consolidation amongst the major media companies. They're already starting to do it. Discovery has bought Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers has HBO, and they've discovered that they can put their money, like Warner Brothers decided to release all their major tentpole movies in the same day and date on their streaming service. So HBO Plus. So that drives people to the subscription model, and that gets them hooked. And so you don't have to amortize the cost of one big blockbuster over just the box office from that film. You can amortize it over all the subscriptions that it brings in for the whole year over all of their products. So it's a tough accounting issue, and there's going to be a lot of lawsuits flying around, but I think you're going to see more consolidation, and you're going to see prices rise on each subscription for any of the majors.
Go ahead, Noah.
I thought it was very interesting to see like group watch features, so you can do a watch party with your community of friends, whether that is in the local area, but obviously worldwide. So that was something that tapped into. I think we'll see more of that, and that will grow. Consumer spending is also on the rise, right? So like COVID, there was a huge saving increase where the average, was usually like 8%, and it went way above that. And so there was this extra money that people have been spending on different things, which also leads to my third thing, which was like the rebound for in-person tech support, essentially, right? Setting up cameras, lights, and audio. So I think we'll continue to see that trend until the virtual really takes hold.
Go ahead, Jef.
Man, it's so much great information in so many different ways. As I mentioned earlier, something we're kind of involved is this new gaming side, just like Nigel said, was with sports betting and such. That's changing. I'm involved in that in our live sports division, doing professional tennis. So I've been witnessing the change, and people here in the U.S. are finally seeing what they've had overseas for years, and we've been feeding it for almost 10 years now. So it's becoming a thing here. So there'll be more betting, and it's going to be less friction to get to that without having to go through hoops. But at the same time, we have like this new gaming company coming in that's doing this play to earn concept with crypto. Crypto is just changing a lot of people. The blockchain is changing a lot of how people build things in just in structure. It's not so much of I've got to make this game, I've got to push this game, which is a game is almost like pushing a movie out, right? So in many ways they approach it the same way for marketing as such. Now it's becoming of I want to make this and make it easy for people to get in, but it's also going to be more rewarding with this play to earn concept. It's going to be more rewarding. They're going to make real some value out of it, not just points, not just bragging rights and things like that. So I see that changing in the gaming industry or esports industry, and then in the production world, our world that we live in, I see more and more virtual production happening. When I see not this virtual production, I'd be like virtual production in a virtual world. The metaverse stuff is just starting, and we've got a huge opportunity to be ahead of it by working towards that, to be able to do virtual production in an LED volume where you don't have to have all this practical set and all this other expense to create the content. So the things like The Mandalorian started with, now it's become commonplace, and it's amazing to see what can be done, whether it's good or bad. We're seeing both of those, but when it's done well, it's game changing. It literally is.
Yeah, TJ?
I was just wondering about broadcast, the actual traditional broadcast over the air, and how that is going to fare over the next couple of years with all of these online and streaming services bringing such high quality into the fold. Is traditional broadcast going to still be able to produce shows of a decent quality level that's going to get people watching them, or are we going to all end up with, reality TV kind of things?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. I think that there's still a large demographic that still watches TV, so that it's still a market out there. So and there's a tens of millions of hundreds of millions of people that are still there to watch TV. I think that's got a legs, from that perspective. I do, as someone who cut the cord probably, almost 25 years ago, partially by accident, and then just never came back. I'm not part of that organ, and I've just learned that it looks so foreign once you're not in it. Like the idea of seeing ads all the time to me would drive me absolutely crazy. Like I do think that advertising is going to be an interesting puzzle for people, because there is a group of people that are growing up without them, that are basically buying themselves out of advertising. My kids barely ever see an ad ever. I have the premium and I have this and that, and there's just no ads that show up anywhere. And when that happens, when we go to like a free Hulu thing or whatever, and you see ads, you're like, how do people live this way? Like an interruption every 15 minutes just seems you can't get your head around it, and you stop watching it. And so I think that's going to be a challenge. I think that a lot of the sensitivity around tracking and privacy we're going to see that, GDPR was a string that was added but not pulled yet. Same with the California laws. No one's pulling that string yet. When they start pulling that string and yanking on it, no one's going to want to hold on to people's personal information, because the fines are astronomical. Like if they actually start enforcing GDPR, they haven't done that yet. They're giving everybody kind of a little time to figure it out, and people are figuring it out. People are they're gonna have to change everything about how they track us and how they put that together. So that makes the whole thing more complicated, as you go down that path. So I think that advertising is going to be a big challenge, for a lot of folks. Go ahead, Noah.
Two things for TJ's point. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some sort of like reverse syndication move, where basically you have these Netflix shows, and somehow like the major broadcasters take those shows that have been produced on those platforms and brought them back to television once enough episodes have been produced, because they need to still fill the time and content there. Obviously, I think broadcast is dying as a medium as a whole. And then the second thing I was going to say, Alex, can you further explain the GDPR?
Yeah, GDPR is the privacy laws that have been put into place in Europe. And so basically, there are a whole lot of things, like that's why you have all those things that pop up and say, can we track you? In almost every major website says, can we track you? Can we track you? And so the issue is that right now, some sites still ignore that. Some sites get around it by not giving you clear buttons that you can turn on and off. They're all trying to fight it because they've gotten lazy. So people who have gotten lazy, they get so much data around about us. I mean, you open up some of these. I mean, if you're using a Mac, just take Safari and look at the alert that it gives you, in the newer versions, and it'll tell you like Mac OS. I think Mac OS Rumors has like 100 trackers on that first page. There's just incredible numbers of trackers because Apple's just giving you, because Apple doesn't make any money off of that. They don't care. So Apple's the other piece of this is Apple's slowly just turning all of it off. And the problem is that Apple users are the ones that spend all the money. So the thing is that so they're turning off this huge. Apple's just slowly turning off a huge faucet. Why are they not doing it immediately? Is because everyone would throw a tissy fit. They're throwing a tissy fit now, and Apple's turned the volume to 2 out of 10. And so as Apple just keeps on every year, they're just going to turn up another notch of closing off all of these pathways because they don't make any money off of that and they don't care. So they're going to keep on turning those privacy knobs. The European Union is going to keep turning the privacy knobs. California is going to keep turning the privacy knobs, and you're going to see all these things get turned up, and that's going to defeat everything that has been done, because the reality is that what people haven't gotten their head around yet, it's not just that they're pickpocketing us. I mean, that's what it is, right? They're pickpocketing our privacy, but they're also they're stealing our sanity. When they put up relevant ads, they say that serves us better, but it actually makes us more crazy because it requires. Here's the thing psychologically, and this is starting to come up in some of the psychological, some of the papers. Every time you make a decision in your brain, you're actually tiring it. You're actually wearing it down. So you really have a certain number of decisions a day. And you'll notice at the end of the day, you can make a lot of bad decisions because you've been worn down by all those decisions. Ads that don't matter to you don't require you to make much of a decision because you're not paying attention to them. Ads that matter, ads that are more relevant to you, create more stress for your brain. So your brain is actually working harder because it has to say, no, do I want that? And then there's a whole bunch of decisions and a bunch of things, and then you go back to whatever you were doing. And so the thing is that it's actually putting wear on people, and it's creating a lot of the bad behaviors. People are starting to go, oh, it might actually be the fact that we're doing all these things that are constantly tapping on people's forehead all the time, And so the thing is as that becomes more and more a conversation, which I think over the next couple of years you're going to see that conversation come forward, is that the relevant ads are actually bad for us. Like that is the thing and so that undermines everything. Like the entire system is built on, it makes it better for you because now you just get exactly what you want. And that may not be the case, and so I think that as that ramps up, people are going to get more and more sensitive, about those things. And so it's going to be a really interesting time as people start to fight back, and around that. And again, if they turn on the actual teeth of GDPR, everyone's going to be like, oh, I don't want any information because that'll be millions and millions and millions of dollars of. I already work with once you start working with Fortune 10, Fortune 100, really, all they talk about is who's going to keep the data and how are they going to keep the data and what's going to happen with the data and when do we throw away the data and how do we not have to manage the data and do we have to do this all? Like everyone wants to not deal with that anymore because unless they have a good reason that's going to make them money, they don't want to have any part of it because they're too afraid that those suits are going to turn on, and so the enforcement's going to start flipping the switch. And so as that they will eventually flip the switch. It was going to be seen as unreasonable if they did it the first year, but this year or next year, they're probably going to start flipping those switches and enforcing it, and everyone's going to start backing away. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, as someone who's had probably 40 different GDPR policy notices I've to work out and write in a easy language way, you'll see one of the latest versions of it is on the Office Hours website. Under data protection at the bottom of the page, that will give you a very good idea of actually what's involved for us here in Europe on all websites and what GDPR policy is and how to implement it and also to deliver it. It's can be done. We do it. As I said, it's on Office Hours, and that gives you a good idea of exactly what needs to be done and followed. To do GDPR.
Absolutely. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia in Canada. Says, do people see more vector-svg type animations becoming more common in live streaming? SPX and Tuomo mentioned lottie file format, for example. Any recommendations for animation software to build lottie files?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I love SVG vector files because basically anything you draw and create with them, no matter what resolution you have, it keeps the quality. You know, there's no bit stepping as you have with a JPEG or a PNG file. The tools to animate it are a bit aren't that many elegant tools. You know, you have to know quite a bit to kind of do animations until I suppose a more simplified engine is there to make vector animation. Then you'll see it take off more because I use it all the time. Everything I create, all logos and that I do as a SVG in a vector format to export out as an SVG because it's a tiny file size, but the resolution is, you know, is independent of that.
Go ahead, Courtney.
This is the first time I've heard of the lottie file format, so I can't be an expert in that area as to finding a program that allows you to animate in it. But as far as it becoming more common in live streaming, have we forgotten about Flash? Really? Flash was a vector type format, allowed animation. It covered the internet, and Steve Jobs pretty much single-handedly wiped it off the face of the earth. I'm refusing to put it in.
It was such a processor pig, though. I mean, it was so processor intensive. I mean, it was a scourge. Like I get that Apple did us a favor, in my opinion, because as someone who had to deal with it on the back end, it was just such a heavy format. I don't think we could have gotten to where we are on the internet if Flash had remained prevalent.
But it was an animated format, and people got carried away with it to the point that it became an annoyance and the scourge, as you said, and it bogged down all computers at every website that had a Flash interface.
And the security issues were just.
So I don't see us moving back in that direction again.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, being someone again who loved Flash when it was around, and it was a hog. It was a hog, and the security aspect of it. SVG files are not the same thing. The weight of an SVG, we're actually using them. There's the SVG is the logo on the website presently. You'll see it. It's prevalent throughout the web when people are doing vector graphics and stuff. So SVG files are already there. We're using them presently, and then because they're very, very small, the weight of them, they're not like the hog that Flash was. So it's not the same to put Flash with an SVG file. SVGs are already prevalent around the web because they're so tiny. It's just animating them is just a bit complicated, that's all.
Yeah, I think from a production perspective, we can separate out SVG as it relates to the web versus motion graphics. So as we look at more online, kind of browser-based graphics in the sense that of what SPX does, I think that makes a lot more sense. I think that it makes sense on the web. It makes even more sense for kind of browser-based graphic systems because it is a lot lighter and resolution independent. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes to us from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California, and he says, will we start seeing noise assist or other types of tools as a standard in the future? I could see it as common as compression, gates, and so forth, once the processing power is figured out in mixers, cameras, and so forth.
Go ahead, Jeff.
My feelings is you're not going to see it except in software soon because chips are becoming so unavailable. More so in this market, in the audio market. So a lot of this noise assist and stuff, it's going to force people to develop better software solutions that are doing the thing that you're asking about. I would say that we're going to see in the next year, without a doubt, multiple DSPs going to software only, where they're not depending on a FPGA or a chip to actually run them. They're going to software because that's what's available.
Go ahead, John.
So the big challenge here with these type of routines is many of them are patented, and so they're intellectual property for the firm that have invented a novel routine for noise reduction, and so that offers significant amount of challenge for distribution and marketing.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, kind of riffing on that, yes. And we used to spend a lot of money on getting both a hardware seeder system and an operator for it when we wanted to do noise suppression, particularly for live recording. And then we've seen them virtualize it in a plugin. We've seen all sorts of other plugins try to do the same thing. And I think there's so much compelling need for that kind of code that I suspect that, like the competitors to the huge graphics programs that were very expensive in the early days, you see them all come down, and suddenly there are $20 plugins that do most of what those other things did, because the need for the service was so broad and so important for more people that smart coders came up with workarounds to some of those patents and something that was close to as good. And I think that's going to happen with noise reduction. I think there are going to be a lot of smaller, simpler, real-time noise production or noise reduction tools as the coders get their heads around the concepts.
And it's already in a lot of things. Obviously, Zoom is doing it on the back end at the server level. We have, Apple. Anytime you put a headset in, it's doing noise reduction, active noise reduction. So there's a lot of things that are happening in this area already. I think that from a production perspective, the two leaders, well, the two big leaders for hardware, of course, are the Noise Assist with sound devices and Cedar. In the software end, CRISPR is one that we'll probably see used more often, as well as the RTX solutions. But as Jef said, the RTX solutions are really held back because they require hardware that is very hard to get a hold of. So I think that those are the ones that we've seen it from a production perspective that are the leaders in that area. But it's used in a consumer level. It's being used everywhere. I mean, just everywhere it's making decisions about it. I'm always amazed by I'm amazed by both what Apple's headsets, for instance, will hear and not hear. They'll cut out all kinds of things, but if you're washing the dishes, all of that goes in. So I just decided that's okay. Next question.
Morgan Price is up next from Victoria, British Columbia in Canada. And Morgan says Office Hours loves Apple Keynote and the app, and I do too. What Apple Keynote trends do you see beyond USDZ, of course?
Go ahead, Jesse.
I think if you look at the marketing materials for Monterey, you're going to see about 80% of what they were advertising is video integration and communication tools. And I would not be surprised if those trends continue throughout the whole Apple ecosystem of software.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's really missing in Keynote right now is the ability to see and send to virtual cameras. So, right now, Keynote has solved almost every problem for remote presentation. Being able to have live video input, but the problem with that video input is it has to be kind of an external webcam or something like that. So that live video input becomes an issue there. And then its ability to send it as a camera back out to send it with embedded audio back out into the system is probably the biggest thing that Keynote's missing at the moment. And so I think that they'll solve that. But they've solved everything. I mean, it really is. As someone who works with all of them, there's nothing else. If I had to compete with someone, I would just hope that everyone shows up with PowerPoint, because I just Keynote it's not even fair. It's like getting into a race with it's like a Chevette getting in a race with a Ferrari. They're not in the same piece now at this point. Like, I'm doing all of my stuff in Keynote. I'm going to be doing Picks of the Week for MacBreak, and all of them are going to be done in Keynote just to prove what I can do in video as a video production tool, what I can do there. Because it's really probably, again, I've made more money with that app than any other app that I've ever owned. So I didn't have to pay for it. So anyway, so I think that's going to be the big thing that they have to fix. The big thing that we don't know, that we feel like is going to be the other shoe to drop, is USDZ. So was USDZ right now Apple is sneaking up on AR in the most obvious sneaking up. Like, they told you they were excited about it 3 years ago. They started releasing USDZ files 5 years ago. They keep telling us that, hey, now they've built things that let us really easily build models from phones. So all of these things are them slowly working towards a solution. And when we know that USDZ is near the surface is when it ends up in Keynote, because it will change everything about presentations. And it will be very hard for anyone not supporting USDZ to keep up. I mean, it will make everything look antiquated, because now, even if you're not rotating around 3D objects, I can now take this cup and figure out exactly what angle I want you to see it at in the presentation. I can rotate it around, rotate it up and down, turn it up, we already showed this with the clarity.io. If you go to their website, you can download a USDZ file and just open it up and find the place that you want it to be. Like I want it to look like this, and I do that right now in Motion. So I bring USDZ into Motion, I rotate the objects to where I want, and then I render them out with an alpha channel to Keynote. Well, obviously there's some point where we stop doing that, where I can take a complex object that I want to talk about and just set it in Keynote and just move it around to where I want it. And I could do that live while I'm talking to a client. And that's going to be lethal. Like just, and suddenly you're going to see, the other thing is the market for 3D models. It's going to do two things that we don't see very often, I think. One is it's going to create an extreme demand for 3D models, because suddenly all these, Keynote, the 3D world is very small. Like we think we're big, but we're tiny. We're like this tiny little thing. And so suddenly all these Keynote folks that suddenly can have 3D models are going to suddenly just arrive. And it's like, it's like you had a club with 10 people and, 1,000 people show up. And so there's going to be this huge demand for 3D objects of everything. But the market for it will be for $10 for 25 objects, not one object for $150. And so the people who get ahead of that are going to make millions, in my opinion. Like if they get, put out collections and do those things right now, it's going to be, because Keynote feed folks will just get in there and, I'll just buy things for $10 just to add some, whiz bang to it. So there's always that early mover opportunity to do that. And so we'll see what happens. But I think that people who build good models will do it. Will do well. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Noah Sargent again in Fullerton, California. He says, I tried explaining the power of office hours community to my wife. How would you explain this to your friend or partner?
Go ahead, Jef.
Am I the only one that has office hour friends and then real friends, as my wife says? That's how it's referred. So is that a real friend or one of your office hour friends? And it's like, well, there's no difference. We just happen to meet in different places. That's all. And yeah, it's definitely hard to explain to them, but I definitely cherish seeing you guys and hearing you guys. And I actually listen a lot more than I actually can participate due to time constraints. But it's great having that connection. It's like, I know if I need somebody to do a thing, I can reach out to that person. And I don't have to spend hours trying to find somebody with recommendations. So that's my biggest thing, is like, I have one place a brain trust that I can go to and pull from such a wide variety of brains that have, whether it's similar stuff that I do. I mean, we're technically all in the AV game of some sort, but it still gives us that ability to reach out and grab from multiple people how to do something if you don't know it yourself. And that to me is the biggest thing that keeps bringing me back.
Ken.
Yeah, this question gets asked quite a bit, and the best explanation that I found, that's why I made a clip of it. It's on the Office Hours website on the About page. Click on Alex's name and it plays a video when he was on MacBreak Weekly and Leo, and they had a back and forth about it. And when Leo kind of, he said that light bulb moment for Leo when he finally got what Office Hours is about. So that video clip, I put a link to it. There's a link to it in Meccana as well. I think that's one of the best kind of concise ways of explaining this whole great community that we have here.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I like to explain it as a group of media professionals that gather every day to do a show, but they also get together and figure out what other people know and how to lift other people up. So when we look at somebody like Tony Mobley, who's a great example of somebody who's retired, but he wants to do a show, and he kind of fell into the show accidentally because we said, hey, give it a shot. And we believed in him, and he believed that we could help him. And we actually lifted him up enough, to putting his show in the cloud, which is pretty amazing for a guy that's retired that has, he just wanted to help people, and we were like his tools. And so it's fascinating to see the people in the community like Jonas that are just like, hey, let's see if we can break this thing. So his show gave us an opportunity to use tools and push things forward. So he helped us, in a lot of ways more than we ever helped him. So it's cool to see this community thrive in that manner where we can break stuff because the audience isn't huge. Like maybe he gets 100, 200 people live, but we want to do this on 10,000, 200,000 eventually. So being able to have a safe place to break stuff is the great thing about this community.
Good, Sky.
Well, with the Avid DS, I had been a part of a virtual community 10, 20 years ago. And so this is not a new concept, but what I'm also smelling here is how do I tell my wife I do love her more than this community? And that's the biggest challenge. And my practice is, yeah, that has to be a conscious thing. And so I have to, be aware of being, as talked about, the liminal, being in the moment, being present with her when I'm with her, and also, or whatever the significant other. And consequently, this, I think Jef really hit it on the head, as a brain trust is a possible way of explaining this community to people that are not a part of the 600 and how many days, Jeffrey? 650 day, almost 650 experiences together that we have had. You can't really, it's not tangible. So that's where you try to find words like brain trust and community. But if people don't have those experiences with those words, yeah, you do have to find other ways to do it. So that's why I'm trying to be present with my wife and my family when I'm with them, and then learn all of the stuff that I need to learn and solve the problems that I can with this group.
Yep. My wife, one long time ago, I came up to my wife and I told her that she was my best friend. I said, "You're my best friend." She said, "Honey, I'm your only friend." so I'm not the most social person. And so the funny thing about this is that I realized that for me, being social with all of you is just been, I think that what I don't do is I don't do small talk well. And so what I like about this community, when I talk to other people about it, I like the fact that I get in and we're talking about things that matter almost all the time. We have small talk here and there, but for the most part, there's like things that are interesting that are all the time. And we're not talking about the weather, and we're not talking about like you get in and there's people just, talking about it. And I think I call it the geekiest water cooler ever. Like it's a global water cooler that is like uber geeky. So if you stood around the smartest people around a water cooler and we're talking about what you love to talk about all the time, that's what this is for me. And so or the other way I think of it is a lot of times is a open office that actually works, where you can turn people off, you can turn people on, you can decide to participate, you can decide not to listen. Like but you have access to it. But overall, I try not to describe it as much as just saying what it's like. The fact that I'll show up and there'll be 30 people with all their some cameras are on and nobody's there, and there's everything's a whole bunch of cameras are off. But if you start talking, suddenly people just start showing up. Like they're all there. They're just kind of waiting, to have a conversation. And I just think it's pretty much any time I feel like hanging out with folks now, I just sit down and jump in. And a lot of times I jump in very quietly. I just open up my speakers and then I'm working away, and I don't just immediately come in and turn my camera on, but I just turn my speakers on and just kind of listen to what's going on. And if something, I find interesting, then I'll turn my camera on. And so I think that, and I love that. I really love hanging out in this community. It's just the most amazing, again, something that I did not expect when we turned this thing on. So anyway, next question.
Next one comes from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. He says, will the outcome of CES influence media trends in 2022?
Go ahead, Bill.
For some firms and things, probably yes, because we've been doing it that way forever. I mean, a lot of companies kept everything under wraps, held on to their technology and things like that, and then went to the trade shows, whether it was CES or NAB or something else, and revealed it to the world to make a big splash. The thing is, I've been just astonished at how this experience, and Alex, I just want to thank you again for this, in this way. The standard you set at the beginning of office hours of you don't hold secrets here unless they're critically important to do it. You share what you know with everybody else. You talk about it openly. That cross-pollination. And I see some of that in areas like GitHub, where the programmers come together and instead of just working in their little thing, they share code, they share ideas, This really does move things along so much faster. So my concern for this question is that the companies who still try to hold everything super close, and there are reasons for that, they're not going to get the benefit of this kind of community interaction that can really make, I think, products, services, everything better when everybody gets a chance to see and put maybe good advice into it. So I just think this is very powerful what's been happening here for the last year because of that feature.
Nigel?
Yeah, I saw two different questions here. Question one is the outcome of CES. Does that mean only a third of the people turning up that they were expecting? And what will that do in terms of casting messaging around whether big events have any future? And I think that's one outcome to watch. I think the other outcome is how influential is CES. And I think like Comdex before it, over time, its influence will start to diminish to the point where it's a great place to meet your customers, but it's not necessarily a technical driver, because I think as this environment has proved, there's a lot better way to get your technology across.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times for those of us that were in the industry, CES was more of very rarely did they unveil something that we didn't see coming. It was more of a, yes, this is the year they're going to talk about 3D, or this is the year they're going to talk about HDR or 4K or 8K or whatever. But a lot of us have seen it coming for a long time. So it was just mostly letting us know the manufacturers are actually going to try playing now. So I think that is so I think that, and I do think that there's much more efficient ways to get the word out than going to a conference. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think one thing a lot of manufacturers or smaller manufacturers are going to miss about CES is discoverability, because that was a place, CES, where a small manufacturer in China who had a brand new product that nobody had ever seen, they don't have any money to market it worldwide, can go and have a little booth at CES and be discovered and be mentioned on one of the show dailies or so on, an article about them, and it can take off and explode into a great product. That being discovered now on the internet just through streaming is a lot tougher now without buying your way in. And so I think the cost of getting discovered is going to be a lot higher now if we move to an all virtual type of event.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd only been going to CES for about the last 4 or 5 years, and what I was finding is that it was really a place to catch up with friends and meet people that you didn't know through your network. But getting to see some of the 8K first, that was pretty shocking. And the Oculus, I remember seeing that, like stepping on a ledge and going, whoa, like this is the future. Like this felt real. Like I can feel like, the arm hair standing up because of a robot throwing a grenade at me. I actually jumped in dress pants and almost put a hole in my dress pants because I went on the ground jumping from a grenade that went off in the Oculus booth. It's pretty crazy, some of the stuff that you can see at CES. And I think a lot of companies that put up the money to go travel with all that hardware, the booth, especially overseas to places like IBC, you eat that a couple times. I know I still have some plane fare credits, and I helped put up the Reflect Media booth at NAB. I don't think we're going back. Yeah. I don't think we're going to do it. It's just, it costs too much to ship all that stuff over there. Now we're storing it, and it's eating up money. And with TikTok surpassing Google in terms of bandwidth, I think it's just a matter of what they call customer acquisition costs. So if you're going there to showcase and gather customers and get leads, when you do the math, what did that lead cost? And that's what a lot of people are doing with trade shows, is getting leads. And the numbers, when you see it, TikTok or something virtual that you can do, whether it be who knows, something in the metaverse, people are going to start throwing money that way.
Yeah, I mean, I just keep coming back to a physical event, basically cuts out well over 99% of your addressable market. And so every time I see like I walk into the Intel booth and I know that they had to have spent north of $10 million on that booth for CES. And I think about what I could do if you gave me $10 million and at Intel, like I wouldn't do that, but if Intel gave me $10 million and said that we want to get the same impact as we get there, I'd build a, $2 or $3 million facility, studio, and I'd have them start doing all the stuff that they want to talk about every single day with a full staff, and bringing people in and talking about technology and building a whole TV network, and all of these literally for each year of the investment that they make in CES and all the other conferences. If the companies just pulled in, and of course you couldn't do that when we started doing conferences, right? That didn't happen. We didn't have streaming the way we have it now. We didn't have all the things that we have now. But nowadays, every one of these companies could create their own TV network. Now the problem is they can't get over their marketing, which is that they want to talk about them the whole time. And what they haven't learned yet is to be a news organization, for the industry that they're interested in. So like, for instance, if Salesforce spent all of it about running your business and how to inspire employees and how to be part of a thing or whatever, they'd have this huge following and they don't have to talk about Salesforce at all. And there are people who've already figured it out. They're called Bloomberg. like Bloomberg figured this out a long time ago, is we will build content for the people using the Bloomberg interface, and that's all they wanted to do. And they turned it into a whole network, so Michael Bloomberg understood this a lot earlier than everyone else. But every major company could do that. And, it's just a matter of figuring out how to serve your market with content. And I think that we're going to see more and more and more of this, as the trend is going to be companies being the content rather than trying to. This is where as advertising becomes harder and harder, it's better to be the content than trying to interrupt everybody else's content with yours. Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
To the point of small company discoverability, I think they've got greater opportunity now in formats like this than perhaps they ever did. I mean, look at some of the startups that have come into office hours and what's happened to them. You just need to come into an environment like this with a message, with an idea, with maybe not a presentation, but with some kind of coherent thing to expose the group to, and then come back, have a Q&A and come back again. And you just see how those ideas flow through a community like this. And I think that you get way more exposure that way to maybe the types of contacts or the types of people that you really want. Look at the members of groups like this. I think it's far more efficient, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I think that there'll be some point where we have more than a second hour, that we have more hours that are open where we're bringing in different people to talk. But I think organizations like ours could make a huge difference, not just ours, but more in like this, where we're talking about maybe 3D every day and video every day and audio every day in some hour. And we're bringing people in to talk about the new products and to talk about things that are being released. And again, if we build up enough people that are following this, we can get into a position where, that we can watch those later and record. But if we're really interested in that product, then we can jump on and ask questions and be part of the conversation. And that's going to be, again, when you get back to discoverability over time, when we refine that and as other people take advantage of that both on the viewership as well as, because there's a lot of folks that in the press that are in industry that are quietly hidden in our viewers. So the thing is that as that continues to increase, you could potentially get, all you have to do is show up at a show like this, and rather than spending hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars going to a conference. Next question.
Next one comes from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California, and he says, as office hours scales, we will encounter more conflicts and a larger variety of perspectives, both positive and negative. How are we set up to handle this?
Go ahead, TJ.
I think the rules that Alex has, or the guidelines, I should say, that Alex has set up for us of, be respectful, just be nice to one another. No contentious topics, discussion, religious politics, Mac versus PC, etc. Just generally be respectful. And that goes a long way to self-policing our own community here.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, the self-policing part is really the key part. And obviously, the more diverse we have, the more people we have from different areas of the planet, the better that will be, because then you'll recognize that the language you use or the jokes that you might say, and when it's a much broader range of people around, that those things maybe aren't funny because that culture just doesn't find that. What you might think, oh, that's just funny in general for everyone. Right. The more diverse the culture that we have, the more that we're going to get to learn. Actually, okay, yeah, that what you might find works for you, is better when you kind of see, oh, okay, that's where you can see other people's perspectives. The more different perspectives we have.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Exactly. As the audience grows, that's really where everybody just has to continually remember that the best interests are in the interests of the audience, and one thing I like to keep in mind is that, you have to respect boundaries and all those things, but also respect the time that the audience is giving you and not to waste it.
Yeah, and we're going to do it fairly organically. Like it's not going to be something that we push. The other thing to know is that again, we're probably going to aim to push office hours a lot wider. We're probably not going to aim to push Discord or AR or after hours wider very quickly. Like in fact, it'll probably become harder and harder to get into Discord and after hours than easier. That's not, the office hours is something, there's a kind of a yin and yang. And so that it will still grow. We want to make it still available to people, but there will be limits to how fast that can go because we want people to come in. We want them to learn kind of the rules of the process and kind of become part of that community before we add a lot more. We don't want to just suddenly have a 10x growth in the community that really interacts because we have a lot of control in office hours of what that looks like. So we can grow that widely without it greatly impacting the culture. Whereas after hours and Discord are a little bit more complicated. So anyway, so we're gonna. It'll be a kind of a slower process. Like for instance, as we really turn it on, you'll know that I'm turning up the thing because that the daily email will no longer have a link to after hours. Like it'll be harder to find than it is right now. So because we just want to protect that because that's kind of the core. That's kind of that's the center weight of the system. That's there. And so as we grow, but my goal is to have office hours continue to grow because that's going to allow us, that's going to give us more access. It's going to give us more, market leverage. It's going to give us all kinds of things that are good for us as a community, but we don't necessarily, but the only reason we can do that effectively is because of after hours and because of Discord and because we have another place that's a little bit quieter and safer to manage that. Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas is up next, and he asks, what might the experiential entertainment trends be for 2022?
Jef?
I'm all about, and you probably have heard me say it before, all about the virtual production, the LED volumes. When people first see that a really well done Unreal Engine based or their variants of that, Disguise ran with the extensions and everything, and how real it looks standing in front of, say, a small pixel 2 mil or 1.9 mil LED wall. I mean, it makes your heart pump. It's that much impact, and I think that's exactly what the experiential market needs. They're going to see more and more of that happening.
Yeah, absolutely. David?
Having seen both of those traveling Van Gogh experiences, they were kind of cool and good use of big empty space. The Sistine Chapel is still on tour. I might go check that out next week. I think they're very entertaining ways to. It's like short attention span museums or something.
Yeah, exactly. Pop-up museum. I do. We did that years ago, like 5 years ago. We were doing, a motion capture system that did before Inside Out was there, and I was like, I can just see empty spaces in cities that just become something different every week. That you can go explore something different every single week by just walking in, and it just does the thing that you need to do. Of course, you can do it at home, but you may not have the best equipment. What if we had headsets that you can't afford and things that are, that in a tracking system is going to be way more accurate and a big open space? How many people have a 30 by 30 open space that they can just wander around in? So I think you're right. It's going to be huge. Go ahead, Courtney.
I see all these escape rooms that popped up over the last couple of years, moving to virtual Unreal Engine based group effort, online gaming kind of thing, so that they can continue the experiential entertainment in an environment that is 3D and interactive with multiple people, like a Zoom call.
Yeah. Jef?
There was one thing other that's similar to this, because it's multiple places in Vegas. If you get out to Vegas, called Area 15, John knows what I'm talking about. I didn't know what to expect. We had an afternoon off, and so me and a couple of guys went over there. It's like, what is this? It is really different. It's the best way I can say it. It's a very different entertainment. There's this Mega Mart that we've seen all kind of ads for up and down the strip. Like, what is this? What is this? What is this? It is effectively a puzzle solving. So it's kind of like the escape rooms, but it's just like all these little layers of things upon things upon things upon things in this space. And the Area 15 space, it's multiple companies within one space. But and it had the Van Gogh there. That was another one that was there. They had one room that I liked, and it was probably 16 projectors, and it was a football stadium projection. So you're sitting on the field, and you're watching one end or the other end or the sides, and that was multiple camera angles of a football game. So it brought a whole nother kind of feeling of hanging out with your friends watching a football game. That was one afternoon. But that Megamart thing was just like, it's $55 to go inside. So I scratched my head a couple times and I bailed out of it, and we were running short on time. The two of my guys that were with me went back later, and they spent 3 hours inside it. And so they said it was just really fascinating. It's like you had these little puzzles to solve and things to decrypt, and those kind of spaces. There's two, I believe, of the Area 15 group, Vegas, and then another one somewhere else, maybe Phoenix or something. But those type of places that are using these massive malls or massive spaces that are empty, they have a lot of potential to come in with it's high tech, but very little build out compared to just a normal build out of say a Disney or something like that needs to build out a space to a certain look. I mean, think of the millions of dollars they're spending on that Star Wars edition down at Disney. Millions, if not billions, right? And people walk away from that going, wow. But whenever you can do it for a fraction of the amount of money in a digital form or in a smaller format, it's pretty big ROI on that. So if you can experience that, I would recommend it. Just allow time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that one of the things I think is really interesting is if you looked at what Fathom events have done it for a little while, but if you looked at what Kanye did, or Ye did a couple weeks ago, distributing to theaters, basically taking a concert and putting it into a theater live. I think that that's a trend that theaters are looking for, that process, and looking for how to be part of that. And the results are, I think, from some of the tweets and everything else, pretty compelling. So I think that you're going to see probably more of things like that, of figuring out how to bring those experiences to theaters, because theaters need to find other things to do than play movies. Because pretty much, I think one of the trends we're going to see is that unless it's a big action or a highly cinematic film, there's no one's talking about releasing dramedies or drama or comedies or any of those things to theaters in 2023 or 2024. Most people have acquiesced to the fact that that's not going to happen anymore. So I think that really the reality is that theaters are going to be a visceral experience, or they're not going to be getting that, and so they're figuring out other things to do. So I think that's going to be a really interesting place to watch that process. I also think that there's a real opportunity with AR to augment locations. So if you're a historical location, there's all kinds of heads-up displays of what did this look like. I can imagine, going to the Gettysburg battlefield and being able to stand on a little round top and pick up a phone or have a wearable device and see what it looked like at the time of the battle, and see and have heads-up things of showing you where, this is where Lee was, and this is where Longstreet was, and this is where Pickett's, you can see where Pickett's charge was over there, and you can see this is where this division and this, and all of those things are things that are coming, with AR. And I think that this is probably the year, this or next year will be the year of AR, or where things start to pick. And when I say that, that just means this is the year that Apple releases something, because the market I've never seen any company spend so much money, so much time, and so much infrastructure on one release in the history of technology. Like, I've just never seen. I mean, I've been watching it for 5 years now, and it's just this slow rolling tank that's coming forward. And when it turns on, we all want to pay attention to it, because it's going to be a massive market, and everyone thinks that, that other people are already in it. Other people are already in the phone. Other people are already in the watch. Like other people, this is the one that's going to kind of roll over everything, in my opinion, and then create a bunch of opportunities for other companies as well. But it is going to be we just when you see that keynote that has that in it, you want to think about how you might want to be part of that. Go ahead, Bill.
Just riffing on what you just said, I was surprised when I moved into this neighborhood because there's a small theater chain, Edwards, and they're very high tech. They have a lot of big theaters, Cineramas, other things. They do most of the season from La Scala in opera, and they sell tickets to it, and it does very well from what I understand. So they have even dinner theater to go to the opera virtually for a live feed in from Italian opera. So yeah, I think what you're saying is exactly right. That kind of thing is going to be more and more.
And the thing that will change that dramatically over time, not this year, I don't think, but as we go forward, is high resolution and high frame rate. So when you go to 120 frames per second in 4K or 8K and HDR, it just looks like you're there. Like and so imagine, that opera and you're sitting in wherever you're at and there's just an LED wall, that's showing that. It's going to feel as much like you're there as, if it's done well, than being there.
Plus everyone gets a superb seat.
Exactly. That is the point, is that instead of spending for $100, you'd be in row CCC 93, half a mile away from the band or the stage. Instead you'll be at row 60, and that's going to be, I think that venue to venue streaming will change. It'll end stadium tours eventually, because it just won't make it. Once you sit in that and you're sitting at row 60 with, great audio and all the other things and not having to spend the same amount of money, it won't kill touring, but it will kill stadium touring, because it just isn't going to make sense for the eventually for everyone to go to that many people and be that far away from what you're doing. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia, and he says, I think communities are on the rise, like office hours. What media tools does the panel recommend to help promote ongoing community to support the traditional webinars and so forth?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, Zoom, preferably in 1080p if you can get it. I'm starting to see other communities that are popping up where they're doing longer freeform open water cooler style things that we're doing like after hours. And then the cool thing about it is enable software remote control where somebody else can share the screen, somebody can take it over. So I was watching one where some photographers opened up their studio with Capture One, and they were saying, okay, move the light to the left. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the shoot, and poop, they would hit the button and they would take the picture, and they would be like, okay, it's underexposed. Let's go ahead and take up the ISO. And it was like, what? Like these guys are doing what we're doing, but they're doing it in the photography world. So what's next? I mean, there's all kinds of software out there. So it's interesting to see communities can evolve just using Zoom.
Yeah, I think Zoom and Discord and those are two things that really the Discord kind of gives you this consistency, and Zoom gives you that visceral. And we've been doing that type of thing. We did a shoot, I don't know, probably now it's almost 10 years ago, where we had a DP, Brent By, who's been here every once in a while, literally built a set out of cardboard that looked amazing and had things all, like you couldn't tell, like they painted it and everything else, because he just understands flats, and he understands lighting and he understands detail. And so, because once you shorten the depth of field, you couldn't tell that everything back there was just painted cardboard. And he just showed how you could create this great scene. And this was back in Pixel Core days. And so we were live streaming that. And so people could ask questions. So he would just work for a little while and come back and talk about it, and work for a little while and come back and talk about it. And it was amazing. And I think that we're going to do a lot more of that next year. And so hopefully we'll be able to I think that other people can do exactly the same thing. Go ahead, Rupert.
If I think if the context of community includes the relationship with vendors and with names in the industry, which I think it should, I think there's a healthy relationship. I see when we have these guests come in for like things like second hours, and when they go really well and it all just it comes out looking great, that spreads across like social media or LinkedIn or whatever in both directions. Office hours can say, hey, look, we just had a great session with this vendor, and just equally as importantly, they can say the same thing. Hey, we just had this great session with office hours, and that just has a circular effect, which is that's community itself right there.
Yeah, and communities connecting to each other. I think that community is the next big thing. That's all I'll say for now. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, is up next. How is Blackmagic design influencing media trends?
I'll go ahead, Noah.
I think they're one of the largest influencers for sure. In three ways, I'll bullet point here. In the low end market, right, they're expanding the reach of who can stream or be a part of that with multiple cameras, with the A10 mini series. On the high end, obviously we have the Constellation and other bigger switchers, and that's really just opened up a whole different type of production, essentially, right? Because before, the high end market was $30,000 plus switchers, and now that's being brought again to the masses on a bigger scale. Yes, there are quirks and things here and there, but generally speaking, Blackmagic has a really high standard of quality, and they respond really quickly to concerns from people buying their product. A friend of mine is a Roland executive, and they produce lots of different things, but he basically said that Blackmagic is almost their Achilles heel in a sense of switching and live video components, because they're doing something and they're executing at such a high level that they basically just can't compete.
Yeah, Courtney.
Yeah, they've been the commoditization of live streaming is just like what Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere did with producing edited content. They're doing for live streaming. They brought the cost down of entry. Nobody could afford the cost of high quality switchers and cameras to do a live show. In the past, it would cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. They brought that down to just a few $1,000s. So it's commoditized the process so that now the barrier to entry is very low, and so it's increased the number of people that can do really decent looking live streams.
Bill?
Yeah, I think there are three pillars to the Blackmagic tripod for me. The first one is affordability, because the fact that you could get a camera that good for that little was transformational for a lot of us who were looking at really expensive cameras most of our life, and now you had something that you really could go out and just buy on a credit card that was fabulous. The connectivity, the fact that they built these systems so that your little 6K or whatever connected to ATEMs and gave you that, and that empowers the last thing, which is opening up the interface to all the users. When we got TVs and cameras in the old days, you really had to kind of be an almost engineer to do anything with them. And they have created this environment where, with their color matching tools and the rest of the ecosystem, you can really get in and bespoke setup and control cameras in ways that, unless you're in a TV station, you just couldn't do 25 years ago. So I think all those three things made them what they are today.
Yeah, I think that the issue that they have is that they have someone who is highly technical running the company, who really understands pipelines. One of the big things that they understand is how to take what you've seen them do over and over again, buy a company with a great technology with poor basically. No, your mic's open. Buy a company that has a troubled business model, that can't produce something at the right cost, primarily because they don't understand surface mount. so and that's something that Blackmagic really understands, is surface mounting. And so I think it's been really interesting. One of the things I think that I'm just waiting to see if they do, and I have literally no information about it, is whether they'll take the ATEM software and put it as software. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. And if they did that, it's over. Like, everything's gone. Like, it'll just be like if they take the Constellation software and then say, well, you can now scale it and just put it on a PC in the cloud. If they take what they already have, they have hundreds of thousands of people now with these little ATEM minis that understand the interface. The market force would be massive, So I don't know if that would be a very aggressive thing for them to do, because of course they make money on hardware. So does software make sense? But it could, because it would make them. That would be what most, because of course what they would do is they would do it at a fraction of the vMix cost, the fraction of. So I think that things like vMix have driven a lot of the innovation that ATEMs have had, in that process, and so because of those, just that's what nips at them, and so anyway, so I think that it's going to be really an interesting year or two as we look at that. But I think that they definitely have changed the way a lot of us have done production. Now, I went through the hard years when they released those switchers, and the switchers died all the time, and they had all kinds of power supply issues and heat issues and all kinds of other things. So it's nice to have them get to a point where it's It's pretty stable. But I think that the big advantage they have is the total ecosystem. The fact that they make the cameras and all the other bits and pieces, and then the open architecture. That's why we use them, is because of the open architecture. Go ahead, Jef.
I'm a user of small pieces now. I've moved past a lot of Blackmagic stuff in the years, but I'm not a huge proponent, as many of you probably know. But I agree with you, Alex, in that they actually do have a nice ecosystem put together, and how they're able to tie things. They're getting closer and closer. Just can you imagine, though, if they embraced actual standards and worked with other companies, what they could be doing in the world? Yes, they own a lot of the market. They literally would own the world if they would embrace simple things like Dante, AES 67, 2110, 20. I mean, if they really embraced those things and really worked with other professional video companies to make everything work together. I mean, it frustrates me is they're the only ones using at 1080p. They're only using level B. They're the only people, literally the only ones. We have to change things around.
We joke that level B is Blackmagic.
Right.
It's just level Blackmagic.
It's just they're so and I don't know if it's the ego or if it's just the ignorance. That's the part that just kills me. It's like, why can't you do comms like comms, real comms?
Yeah, I mean, I think the comms would be something they could add, but I think that level B, I think, had to do with the fact that they innovated before the standard was finished, and they wanted to get ahead of it, and so they created their own standard, because I think the two things that Blackmagic is sensitive to is cost. So Dante costs money to add, and so you don't, for a hardware manufacturer, it costs a lot of money. Like, it would change the structure of the cost a lot. And then number two is flexibility. They want to be able to do what they want to do, and the reality is, at this point, as high-end professionals, there's things that we wish that they would do, but they don't need us. Like, they really don't. Like, they are at this point just such a massive part of the bottom of the pyramid. Like, there's this little top that's Grass Valley and VizRT and other things up there that live up in this little world. But the market is like, all you have to do is go to NAB and see how big the booths are. And that is a statement. And the only reason the Blackmagic booth is the size that it is because they can't get any more real estate. They can, they would take up the entire South Hall if they wanted to. I mean, if they were able to. They almost took over the North Hall this year because the real estate was available. So it's an entirely different scale that they're working at, and it's only going to get bigger. Next question.
The next one, and I believe the last one in our queue, from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. What problem do you think you could solve in 2022?
Go ahead, Noah.
I'm going to speak a little cryptically because I can't share all the details, but I think my current business has a limited shelf life due to me physically, but also I'm in a local limit, right, of how much I could scale. So I'm basically looking to plant this seeds for my next business. So I'm talking to friends and mentors to try to flesh that out and figure that out. But it won't solve the problem in 2022, but it'll start planting the seeds for it.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to solve this problem, but I'm spending a lot of time trying to understand cognitive dissonances and heuristics and the way we think and how it affects the way people act and their happiness. And I would love to find a way of using this sort of technology to start exploring that, because I think we can bring such a different range of thoughts and processes to some of these debates that people just don't get from anywhere else.
Yeah. Sky.
Well, again, looking in the past of what, as you said, Alex, the exponential change that we participated in the last 2 years. And in the last year, watching the hardware and the software and the people and the wetware all collaborate and move forward. I'm pretty excited about the meeting we had yesterday and with John Preto. And yes, we may be launching a rocket, but I think it's going to be a vehicle. And with Chris Fenwick's point, it's that we're on a journey together. And so to be intentional and collaborative with the education and the STEM of a thing and the science of a thing and the media of a thing, I'm pretty darned excited about solving this connectivity problem of this rocket launch in March. Kind of excited about it.
Go, Rupert.
If I were liminal, I would believe I could solve ISO audio in Zoom.
Go ahead, David.
It might be a little selfish, but I'm hoping to solve the problem of organization inspired by Rupert's system, that and keeping my socks together in pairs.
That's impossible. The first part, maybe. Second part, impossible. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, solve the problem of slow and bloated websites, but maybe I should run a little workshop in office hours to help people do that, because yeah, that's my aim.
Jef.
Mine's, I guess, a little bit selfish too. David, there is a solution for the sock problem. You have to buy all the socks at one time. You just clean out your drawer, you buy them all at one time, and they're all the same size, they're all the same color, and you never have to worry about it. I did that years ago whenever I was traveling, and I had to wash, we call it wash clothes at Walmart. So we went to Walmart and bought whatever you needed. And then that was a solution at that time. I was like, all right, so 40 pairs of socks is doable. And then you never think about it. All right, so my big dilemma, my big thing, my problem that I'm going to strive on solving is to make it easier for people to do cloud production. I feel like it needs to be a simpler onboarding method, a simpler way of jumping into it, because hardware, I've probably said it 12 times now, but hardware is going to be harder and harder to find. And there is hardware, it's just all in the cloud.
I will say that just to the sock thing, just for 1 second, is that at the beginning of the year I buy usually 10 pairs of socks, smart wool socks, and then I usually have 3 pairs of black socks that are all the same, like one of those little 3 pairs that you get at a whatever. So if I have to dress up, I have the black socks, and then I have 10 pairs of smart wool, and I wear them for a year, and then I get new ones. Anyway, and that's to Jeff's point, that is the way to solve it, because then there's no pairs. There's just like a bunch of them came out, and then there's enough pairs, and you just figure it out until I usually end up with 3 or 4 pairs worth at the end of the year. I don't know what happened to the other ones. So anyway, yeah, I think that for me, it's really continuing this process and figuring out. I'm really interested in, I'm interested in obviously cloud production, but particularly as it pertains to allowing people that are interested in something to be able to build a broadcast about something that they're passionate about without having to be a video professional. So I continue to serve most of the clients that I personally work with from 090. In my little 090 does a lot of things. My thing that I do is super like bleeding edge, and that's going to continue I'll continue to work on that. But what I'm interested in a wider perspective is really thinking about how does anybody be able to do this, and how do we get to a point where the quality is indistinguishable and really by 2023 better than most broadcasts. And I think that Office Hours 2.0 will take a big step towards that from a conversation perspective. And as we start to roll out 3.0, I think we'll pass broadcast. I think that it will look better and cleaner, and it'll be a better execution. 2.0 is the big step towards that, and we'll work on that all this year. But as you start to see us put out the pins for 3.0, you'll start to, I think, see different level of production that's much more complicated and hard than what we're doing now. But the goal is, again, to really push the outer envelope of what's possible, both in how we interact. And then all of that trickles down to someone that's interested in gardening, or interested in crochet, or interested in cars, or interested in cooking, or interested in, whatever it is, that the things that we're out in the front figuring out trickle back to, I can just throw something together and put together a discussion that looks like a broadcast, that engages people, that has people part of that community. All the things that we've learned how to do here is something that anybody could do with a couple hours of setting up. And I don't think it'll be them setting that up to start with. I think it'll be us setting that up for them. I think that it'll be, this group will spawn, I don't know if it'll be this year or next year, hundreds, I believe hundreds of communities that are all about different things that each one of us are passionate about, not, just media. So anyway, that's the thing that we'll keep playing with. Anyway, thanks to the producers for a great set of questions. Yet another conversation that I look forward to every day. I can't believe after 600 and sometimes it's kind of amazing. And thanks to the panel, an excellent panel today with great answers and great conversation. This is it. It's the last one. So we'll see you again for this discussion next year. Next year we'll see you, which will be tomorrow. And so we'll see you there. And we will have the education second hour definitely coming. It's just an incredible couple hours of discussion around education. So definitely check it out, but you have to be in Zoom for that. And for now, we're going to jump into